Hello everybody and welcome to another Books Talks, and this time program or be programmed by Douglas Rushkoff. Before we begin, as usual, if you want to support the channel, please put a like, subscribe, share with your friends. If you want to go a step further, check out my books on my website, and you can find different books, technical books, and why not a beautiful novel that is Lasting Photographs. It passes sometimes since my last books talk and books review. It's not easy when you are a big reader, you read a lot. It's not easy to find books that are really worth to talk about and discuss, and mostly not all of them can be related in some way to photography. In this case, Program or Be Programmed is a book that can be related to what we do right now in photography and to the digital revolution we had in photography. I heard this book mentioned in an interview. I don't remember what interview was, but I know it was some person that I usually trust. So I heard this book mentioned, and the title attracted me, and I decided why not to read it. And the title attracted me because I'm coming from a generation where we had to learn how to program. Just to understand, my first computer was a Commodore 64, so at the time there were no available commercial programs and things like that. So the idea was you got the computer and now you have to learn to write down the basic code. And I remember one of the first thing I did was buy a magazine. There were a magazine with some list of programs, so they had the program. That was just a matter of copying the program in the computer. And by the way, to copying the program was essential to understand the program, because there was always some mistake, some error doing while typing, and so to understand the error and correct it, you had to understand the program. But the first program, it took, I think, some days just to copy, and was with the monkey going up the stairs. I don't remember the title of the game now, but was the usual monkey jumping the barrels and going up. That was how we had to interact with computers. I then did studies as physics and this kind of things. It was essential to understand how to program the computers. In some classes we learned how to program in assembler, so the almost the lowest possible level of programming, more close to the language of the CPU, of the chip, of the electronic components. And so programming for me was something really essential. In my life I did some programming just for fun, some programs that I decided to do because I needed something done on my computer and so on. And recently I did an app. By the way, I don't even know if it's still on the App Store, but nobody bought it. It was a little app for the kind of a photographic challenge. There was the Dart photo challenge. You can check the video here, I think. And I did that. So programming for me is essential. And the beautiful things of this book is that, yes, in the title there's the program or be programmed, and you can think that there's some programming inside. Actually, the beauty of this book is that everybody can read it, because it's not about programming, but is about understanding the biases of the electronic system, of the informatic system, of the computers. So it's different chapters. It's divided in 10 points where you learn things that changed your life because we use the computers probably not in the proper way, and we are becoming a slave of the machine and not the master of the machine. I don't want to go through all the biases that are on these books and the things explaining in this book, because I don't want to spoiler it. It's really a nice reading, but I give you just An example, for example, it talks about time. The great thing of the computer, the email system, or this kind of things was that we could have a communication that was not in real time. So it was simple: write an email, someone will answer it the day after when they feel comfortable, and these kind of things. But actually, and this is intrinsic on the structure of the computer, but actually with the smartphones and all these alerts and all these kind of things, it's on the other side. It changed that everything must be in real time. So you have clients, I had clients writing me on WhatsApp at 2 in the morning asking questions or these kind of things. And usually they expect an answer very quickly. So it changed. We had the opportunity to use the computer to finally create a way of communication that was not like the telephone, that was not in real time, so it was easy to manage our time better, and actually we transformed it in something that is enslaving us to always be present and always answer and so on. So all biases described and things that describes how these intrinsic characteristic of the computers and so on are affecting us. And the point of the book is that you have to learn how to program, or at least have an idea of how is programming, if you don't want to be a slave. And something that it starts with is that the usual thing: you don't need to know how a car works to drive around, but actually we with the computers are on the stage that we are simply passenger and someone else is driving. So if you want to be again the people that drives the car around and so decide the road to take and all these kind of things, we have to learn something about the computer, as we have to learn something about the car, and we go and even have a test to have a license to drive the car. So that's the thing. So what does this have to do with digital photography? It's simple. A program is nothing more than something that makes choices based on the parameters that the programmer inserted in the camera, inserted in the program. So in the case of the cameras, it's exactly the same thing. If we are just user and we don't know, because we are not interested in and the companies don't tell us what are the algorithms used to make some choices, we are not in control of the camera. And this is absolutely correct. And if you want to understand how much is the software part, the programming part important in your photography, just think about how different cameras with the exact same sensor take different photographs. And this is something you are not in control of. This is something that is a choice of the programmer. The programmer will choose the interface to give you, so also that will force you to adapt to some interface and do the things in a certain way, and at the end the results will be biased by that kind of programming. And I see it a lot, and I saw it on myself. I saw it before I went back to film. For me it was a moment of absolute photographic crisis. I was taking pictures and I never felt in control. There was always something that I had to worry about how the camera acted. And when I went back to film, I finally discovered that it was not me. It was not the fact that I lost the ability to photograph, but it was that the camera was biased in some direction and I had no control on that. So I think that what we have now in digital photography is really always someone that is the programmer, the choice that the programmer of the firmware made, that is over our shoulders and make decision for us. While in photography, everything is so simple, because photography is not rocket science. Once you know what are ISO, aperture and shutter speed and how to use a light meter, there's nothing more in photography. Yes, depth of field, but it's really very, very easy. But with this passage to digital, the cameras became very complicated. And that is because more complicated is the camera, more you will move the idea, will shift the idea of being the photographer and no matter the camera, to the camera is essential. And right now you see people that every time there's a new camera on the market, they buy it and all these kind of things. I know some amateur photographers that every 6 months they upgrade the camera, change system, all these kind of things, hoping to find the answer to their lack of abilities in the cameras. And we are doing this in everything. And this book shows how we are doing this with computers. We have no idea how a computer works. And something that is absolutely crazy is that in the schools right now, there are no classes teaching how to program. You find classes that teaches you how to use a word processor or these kind of things. But there's no class teaching how the machine works. When I grew up, I was expecting to see, for example, in the mathematics, in the middle school, elementary school, or something like that. I was expecting to see something as the Boole algebra introduced, so the binary codes and all these kind of things, the operation you do with the binary codes, so the essence of the computer. No, this didn't happen. Actually, we started to teach less and less mathematics and more just how to be a user of the computer. And in photography is exactly the same. And it's very difficult to find information on how a camera works. I have some old cameras with the program mode, and they had a couple of different program modes, or just one is not important, but there was always a little table explaining how the program decided the shutter speed and aperture based on the parameters. That disappeared from our camera manuals right now. It's just trust the camera. Oh, this program mode is good for sport and nothing more. And you don't know exactly what are the decisions behind the use of the kind of program, the choice of shutter speed and aperture. So you are kind of limited because yeah, it's good for sport, but then I need another mode for landscape, and I need another mode for taking pictures of kids, and so on. And you became enslaved by the technology and by the camera. If I think about learn to program or be programmed and photography together, something that can be very interesting, if you look online, you can find an open firmware for Canon cameras. I don't know if I didn't look recently to see if there's this firmware also for other cameras, but for sure you can find an open firmware for Canon cameras. I used it, I put it on a couple of point-and-shot camera and so on, and it's impressive to see the difference from the raw data, the real raw data coming from the sensor, and what you get with your camera firmware. It's impressive to see how many different choices are made by the firmware, and you don't even know what they are. And there are things like simple things like deciding the exposure, things like a little bit noise correction, sharpening, and all these kind of things. And you realize how much the firmware impacts the camera. And you realize how much you don't know how the firmware is impacting the cameras. Again, when I shift to digital, all my workflow, I was with Canon at the time, and I always felt there was something added to my images, something that was not what I wanted, and so on. And when I played with the firmware, with the open firmware, I saw that what I wanted in a camera and what I wanted to get out of the camera was totally different from what the Canon firmware programmer wanted. So, if you learn how to program, if you learn how to not just a program, but to learn how the firmware works, and eventually try something as an open firmware for your Canon and so on, you can really understand what you are doing with digital photography. So this book is fantastic. It's something that I suggest you buy, you read, and you explain this especially to kids, to people that is growing up, and you explain how much is important to be on the wheel of the digital revolution and not just a passenger, a blind passenger, not knowing where it's going. And there's another thing that comes out of this book that is quite interesting, is that if you think about the interest of every software company or hardware company that has a firmware inside like our cameras, is to create a perpetual user. So their goal is not to make everything easy for you and to make the camera really transparent, something that you don't think about, but to make you feel you need that software to achieve a result. So you need the program, you need to buy their products, and this is why we arrived at the point where nobody can think to use photographs that are not in some way elaborated with the post-processing software. Something that was very easy to do with film and darkroom. Yes, there was some dodging and burning and this kind of things in darkroom, but it was something that came directly from us. It was our hands, our tools, with our minds we controlled that. Now with the digital, we let the firmware written by the people selling the camera control all these kind of things. So we became addicted. You find people that are used with Canon and they will never switch to Nikon or so on, because the two systems are biased in different ways, and that's why if you start with one you get let's say addicted. And so that's the big problem. If you learn how the camera is biased and how the camera is working, is interpreting the things, how the camera is pushing your creativity in one specific direction, you will really have much more option, and you will really start to be the creator of the image and not just a slave of your camera. So this book is fantastic. Douglas Rushkoff and Program or Be Programmed is really something that I suggest you to read. If you have kids, read it to them, give it to them, explain to them why it's important, and most of all, if you have kids, teach them how to program. Enroll them in some classes where they learn the Boole algebra, they learn the binary system, they learn all these kind of things, and they learn how to write simple programs. They learn how to interact with the machine in a way that is not just a user, a passive user, but they can become active user. An active user doesn't mean create a profile on a social media or understand how to do advertise around. An active user is someone that recognize where there's an algorithm and when that algorithm is making some decision instead of letting you decide. So that is important. And I give you just an example. We are on YouTube. I have some, as I said, programming background, so I understand when there's a machine making a decision and doing things, and I look at the statistics and I look at how the videos are seen for some time, not time, and all these kind of things. And I absolutely know there are algorithms that are pushing in the direction, and I can even understand what the algorithms are doing, also if it's absolutely YouTube keeps all the concept of the algorithm absolutely private and never shares how the algorithms are working. So that's something that gives you more. And in photography, really, if you know how a program works, you will approach your digital camera in totally different way. And you will understand, by the way, that in the camera you really do not need anything more than to have the data from the sensor as neutral as possible, and aperture, shutter speed, and ISO control. Nothing more than that. Everything that is created on top of that is just kind of, let's say, bullshit. It's just something that you do not need. You can need something that is an hardware feature, is shake reduction can be good, astrophotography on the Pentax system is something fantastic, but that's an hardware thing. That is an option that you have that you don't have otherwise. But 99% of what you have on your camera menus are things that you just can decide in a tenth of a second if you know what are ISO, shutter speed, and aperture and how they work. This said, I went a little bit long again as usual with this book, but I really appreciated it, so thank you very much for watching and see you next time.